Imagine walking into an ancient room filled with paintings that time has forgotten. Your flashlight reveals a face that you do not recognize as the Jesus of the churches. He is young, beardless, dressed simply, nothing that resembles traditional images. There is no long hair or light eyes, just an ordinary figure. The shock is immediate, and you ask yourself, am I looking at the real Jesus? For generations, we have grown up with a single image of Jesus, a gentle, light-eyed man with long hair and a beard, often depicted in radiant, golden light. But here's the twist. That image, the one we see in churches, movies, and books, isn't based on how Jesus really looked. European artists shaped this image during the Renaissance, nearly 1,500 years after Jesus' life. The truth is, Jesus wasn't European at all. He was from the Middle East, a place rich with its own history, culture, and art. The answer lies buried deep in the past, in the earliest images ever created of Jesus, images that tell a completely different story. These artworks, some hidden underground for centuries, reveal a man who looks more like an ancient Roman citizen than the figure we know today. He had short hair, no beard, and wore simple but symbolic clothes. These images don't just challenge our perception of Jesus, they also hold the key to understanding how his story was told and retold across cultures and centuries. Some of these were created years ago, at a time when Christianity was still a small and often persecuted religion. Early Christians used underground catacombs to bury their dead and decorate the walls with art. These spaces became time capsules, preserving some of the oldest depictions of Jesus. Meanwhile, in places like Egypt and Syria, ancient churches preserved their own versions of his image, each influenced by the local culture and beliefs of the time. In some of these early depictions, Jesus is holding what looks like a wand. Yes, a wand. In the Roman world, wands were symbols of power and magic. To the people of that time, stories of Jesus healing the sick or raising the dead sounded like the acts of a powerful magician. These depictions didn't just reflect his spiritual authority, they also mirrored the way people of the Roman Empire understood supernatural power. But that's not the only surprise. Did you know that in many of these early artworks, Jesus doesn't have a beard? Instead, these early artworks depict Jesus with short, curly hair, portraying him as youthful and even athletic. The Roman world, which admired strength and vitality, inspired the design of this version of Jesus. Over time, this image gave way to the more familiar bearded Jesus, a shift that symbolized wisdom and divinity in later Christian art. And then there's the drama of history itself. Not everyone agreed on how Jesus should be depicted. In the Byzantine Empire, fierce debates broke out over whether religious images should even exist. Some Christians believed that creating images of Jesus was a form of idolatry, while others saw it as a way to connect with the divine. These debates, known as the Iconoclasm, led to the destruction of countless early artworks. Yet somehow a few survived, hidden away in monasteries or buried under layers of history. As we unravel this story, we'll explore 10 of the oldest depictions of Jesus ever discovered. Each one is like a piece of a puzzle, revealing how different cultures saw him and what he meant to the people who created these images. Remember to join our community by subscribing to this channel. Let's step back in time to the year 550 CE, to a remote corner of the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt. Nestled in the shadow of Mount Sinai, a place steeped in biblical legend, stands St. Catherine's Monastery. Inside its ancient walls lies something extraordinary, a portrait of Jesus that's unlike anything you've likely seen. Painted nearly 1,500 years ago, this image is not only old, but also one of the few to survive a violent chapter of history. It's a miracle that it's here at all. Christians engaged in a heated debate over religious images during the Byzantine Empire, known as the Iconoclasm. From the 700s into the early 800s, those who opposed icons, or iconoclasts, believed that depicting Jesus or saints was a form of idolatry, forbidden by God. Entire collections of religious art were destroyed, paintings scraped away, mosaics smashed into dust. But this particular image of Jesus survived, hidden in the safety of the monastery, far from the reach of imperial edicts. The painting is called the Christ Pantocrator, and it's a masterpiece of early Christian art. The word Pantocrator means ruler of all, and the image shows Jesus holding a New Testament in one hand and making a blessing gesture with the other. His face is striking, oddly asymmetrical. At first, it seems like a mistake, like the artist couldn't quite get it right, but look closer, and you'll see that this is intentional. The artist painted two different faces on purpose. One side is calm and serene, while the other is intense, almost stern. It's a symbolic representation of Jesus' dual nature, fully human and fully divine. Even in its simplicity, this image speaks volumes about how early Christians understood their faith. Simultaneously, in a location known as Shivta in modern-day Israel, artisans were crafting another representation of Jesus. This one, though, couldn't look more different. Found in the ruins of an ancient Byzantine church, the painting shows Jesus with short, curly hair and no beard. You might find his youthful appearance surprising, particularly if you're accustomed to the older, wiser-looking Jesus of later European art. But this is a glimpse into the evolving story of how people visualized him in different times and places. Interestingly, this shift from a bearded Jesus to a no-beard one wasn't random. It reflects the cultural influence of the Roman Empire. Roman men, symbolizing strength, vitality, and authority, often wore short hair and lacked beards in their depictions. Early Christians wanted to portray Jesus as someone relatable, someone their contemporaries could look at and say, "Yes, he's one of us." Many of these images were in danger of disappearing forever. For centuries, Shivta's church lay in ruins, and the painting of Jesus remained unnoticed until 2018. Just think about that. An image of Jesus, over 1,400 years old, sat hidden in plain sight, weathered and fading, while the world moved on. Let's go back a bit further to 425 CE. In Ravenna, Italy, a woman named Galla Placidia, the daughter of Emperor Theodosius I, commissioned a chapel now known as her mausoleum. Over the north entrance, a mosaic of Jesus as the Good Shepherd still gleams in vivid color. This Jesus also has short, curly hair and no beard. Sheep surround him, a direct reference to Jesus' statement in John 10:14, "I am the Good Shepherd." But what's fascinating is how this image contrasts with another from the same period, the doors of Santa Sabina Basilica in Rome. Carved into the wood is the oldest known image of Jesus on the cross. It's a stark reminder of the suffering he endured, yet it also shows him with a calm expression. He remains powerful even in death, reflecting the growing belief in his divine authority. These two images, created within a few years of each other, tell us something profound. To early Christians, Jesus wasn't just one thing. He was a shepherd, a teacher, a healer, a king, and a sacrifice. Each image captures a different facet of who they believed he was, shaped by the culture and values of the time. Now, let's rewind history to the world of the 4th and 5th centuries, a time of monumental change where the very foundation of Christianity was being shaped. The Roman Empire, which had already been a place where Christians were hunted and persecuted, had transformed into the epicenter of their faith. By 313 CE, Emperor Constantine's Edict of Milan had legalized Christianity, and by the late 300s, it had become the official religion of the empire under Emperor Theodosius. This radical shift in status wasn't just political, it sparked a revolution in how Jesus was understood and depicted. In the Roman Empire, art wasn't just decoration, it was communication. Paintings, mosaics, and sculptures told stories in ways that words alone couldn't. For early Christians, many of whom were illiterate, these images were a way to learn about Jesus' life and teachings. They were symbols of faith, tools for worship, and sometimes even acts of defiance in the face of persecution. During this era, Jesus began to appear in catacombs, underground burial chambers used by early Christians. These were no ordinary graves. They were sanctuaries filled with intricate decorations that told stories from Scripture. One of the oldest depictions of Jesus from this time comes from the catacombs of Comodilla, dating back to around 375 CE. The image depicts Jesus with a beard, a feature that would later become iconic. What's striking is how familiar this image looks. The Alpha and Omega symbols flanking his halo, representing the belief in his eternal existence, remain recognizable even today. Simultaneously, we witness the emergence of Jesus on the cross, a symbol that was not prevalent in previous centuries. The wooden doors of Santa Sabina Basilica in Rome, crafted around the same period, feature the oldest known image of the crucifixion. It's a severe and haunting depiction. But even here, Jesus is portrayed with a sense of calm authority, showing that his suffering was a choice, a sacrifice for humanity. What's fascinating is how these images also reflected the broader cultural changes happening in the Roman Empire. As Christianity gained strength, the portrayal of Jesus began to incorporate elements from Roman imperial iconography. Halos, for example, were originally used in Roman art to signify divinity or importance, and they became a standard feature in Christian imagery to emphasize Jesus' divine nature. Similarly, his clothing, such as the mantle or tunic, was often designed to reflect both his humble origins and his role as a figure of authority. However, not all depictions aimed to honor Jesus. In fact, one of the oldest images of him is a mocking caricature. Found scratched into a wall in Rome, this piece of graffiti shows Jesus on the cross with the head of a donkey. Below the image, the words "Alexamenos worships his god, mock a Christian man named Alexamenos." This crude image, dating to the 2nd or 3rd century, reveals how early Christians were ridiculed for their faith. To outsiders, the idea of worshipping someone who had been crucified, a punishment reserved for criminals, was absurd. Are you enjoying the story? Support our channel by clicking the subscribe button. And yet, this ridicule highlights just how radical the Christian message was at the time. Roman culture did not portray Jesus as a conquering hero or a warrior king. Instead, he was depicted as a healer, a teacher, and eventually as a divine figure who sacrificed himself for humanity. In Africa, depictions of Jesus often show him with dark skin and features that reflect the people of the region. This portrayal isn't just about physical appearance. It's a powerful expression of cultural identity and belonging. For many African Christians, seeing Jesus depicted as one of their own helps connect their faith to their lives, making it feel deeply personal and relevant. One of the most iconic African representations is the Black Christ of Esquipulus, a dark-skinned figure of Jesus revered in parts of Central America but originally influenced by African diasporic faith traditions. Similarly, Ethiopian Christian art has long featured Jesus and biblical figures with dark skin set against vibrant, colorful backgrounds. In Ethiopia, one of the oldest Christian nations in the world, churches like those in Lalibela house intricate paintings of a black Jesus, emphasizing his universality while rooting him in the local culture. These depictions also serve as a counterpoint to centuries of European colonial influence, during which images of a white, European-looking Jesus dominated Christian art worldwide. By reimagining Jesus with African features, artists and believers reclaim their spiritual narrative, asserting that Jesus belongs to every race and nation. Asia often depicts Jesus with distinctly Asian characteristics, reflecting the region's artistic traditions and spiritual philosophies. His portrayal varies greatly depending on the country and its cultural context, but each image carries a deep connection to local values and ways of life. In Japan, for example, early Christian art was influenced by traditional Japanese painting styles. Artists might depict Jesus in a kimono, seamlessly blending into the cultural aesthetics of the time. During the Edo period, When Christianity was outlawed, hidden Christians, Kakure Kirishitan, created unique representations of Jesus and Mary that incorporated elements of Buddhist and Shinto art, allowing them to practice their faith in secret. Similar to figures like Buddha or Hindu sages, Indian Christian art often portrays Jesus as a spiritual teacher. Indian Christian art frequently shows him in flowing robes, seated in meditative poses, or surrounded by symbols of peace and enlightenment. This representation aligns with India's rich spiritual heritage, presenting Jesus as a figure of wisdom and compassion who transcends religious boundaries. In China, traditional depictions of Jesus incorporate elements of Chinese culture, such as the use of calligraphy or the inclusion of Chinese architectural styles in religious scenes. These artistic choices reflect the way Christianity has adapted to local traditions, making the faith more relatable to Chinese believers. In Latin America, Jesus is often depicted as a figure of deep suffering, reflecting themes of pain, resilience, and hope that resonate with the region's history and cultural identity. This focus on the crucifixion emphasizes the struggles of Jesus' earthly life and his sacrifice for humanity, which many Latin Americans see mirrored in their own experiences of hardship and endurance. One of the most well-known examples is the Cristo de la Concordia in Bolivia, a towering statue of Jesus with his arms outstretched, symbolizing unity and hope. In Mexico, the tradition of the Cristo de los Milagros, Christ of Miracles, portrays Jesus with vivid realism, often emphasizing the wounds and blood from his crucifixion. This graphic representation underscores the redemptive power of suffering and the promise of salvation. Latin American art also integrates local traditions and symbols. For instance, in Andean countries, depictions of Jesus often include indigenous clothing or elements of the natural landscape, such as mountains and rivers, connecting faith to the region's geography and indigenous heritage. During Holy Week, processions and reenactments of the Passion of Christ bring these images to life, blending religious devotion with cultural celebration. The emphasis on a suffering Jesus also ties into the broader theme of liberation theology, a movement that emerged in Latin America in the 20th century. Liberation theology views Jesus as a champion of the poor and oppressed, whose life and message call for justice and equality. This perspective has inspired countless works of art that depict Jesus standing alongside workers, peasants, and marginalized communities, reinforcing his role as a source of hope and strength. The art and traditions of different cultures tell the story of Jesus, demonstrating his universality and the diversity of the human spirit. Across centuries, continents, and countless societies, the way people have chosen to depict Jesus has evolved, reflecting their own histories, struggles, and hopes. Each image, whether painted on a monastery wall, carved into catacomb ceilings, or carried in a modern procession, serves as a mirror of the people who created it and the values they hold dear. From Africa's depictions of Jesus with dark skin and distinct local features, to Asia's interpretations of him as a wise teacher with traits aligned to Buddhist or Confucian traditions, and Latin America's focus on his suffering and sacrifice, these representations showcase how deeply intertwined culture and faith are. What's remarkable is how adaptable these depictions are, allowing every community to see themselves in Jesus and find comfort in his humanity. This isn't a compromise of his divinity, but rather a celebration of his connection to all people, everywhere. These diverse images also underscore the interwoven nature of art and faith. In early Christian history, believers relied on symbols to communicate their faith secretly. The fish, anchor, and good shepherd became icons of hope and resilience in times of persecution. Even as Christianity grew into a dominant global religion, these symbols remained, woven into the fabric of the faith. They remind us that even when words fail, art can tell stories, connect communities, and inspire change. If you're enjoying this story, consider clicking Super Thanks. You're ensuring that stories like this keep being told, summing up the exploration of history, faith, and culture in ways that connect us all. As Christianity expanded into the Roman Empire, its artistic traditions merged with existing ones. Roman artistic styles, with their emphasis on realism and grandeur, heavily influenced early depictions of Jesus. The clean-shaven, youthful Jesus of the early centuries, dressed in Roman garments, gradually gave way to the bearded, regal Christ that symbolized wisdom, authority, and divine power. In Latin America, the crucifixion became central, embodying themes of endurance, redemption, and the hope that suffering can lead to salvation. These depictions weren't just about Jesus as a figure of faith. They became powerful tools for telling stories, spreading messages, and rallying believers around shared values. Yet these images also tell a story of survival. Time nearly erased many of the oldest depictions of Jesus. Wars, natural decay, and deliberate destruction, like the Byzantine Iconoclasm, threatened to erase the earliest visual interpretations of Christianity. Still, some survived, tucked away in catacombs or hidden in remote churches, waiting to be rediscovered. These ancient artworks are not just religious treasures but historical records, offering us a window into the lives of early believers and the challenges they faced. Thanks for watching. Join our community by subscribing to this channel. Until the next video.